Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to start this upcoming group of videos with some hand reviews from the 50K PPC from this World Series of Poker, where I was lucky enough to make a pretty deep run, and of course always one of the most exciting events of the year. But we're going to start on day one with a bunch of common 8 game, 9 game situations, and in this one, I encountered a Razz spot when we were relatively deep stacked and just playing normal chippy V poker. That was reminiscent of a Razz hand I've run on our channel already from a cash game where I had the best draw in a big pot and failed to put in enough bets. And in this situation, we did a bit of the opposite, and you can see and judge for yourself as we look through ProPokerTools Odds Oracle today to decide if that was a good decision or not. Anyway, the hand started out with me coming in for a raise with the 2 up and the 3-6 in the hole, 2-3-6, a very strong starting hand, of course, and I got 2-bet by the 6 behind me in a non-steal spot, so I was giving him credit for a reasonable range. Everyone else folded, and of course these hands took place several months ago, so I don't have all the dead cards and all the info, but we're just going to look at this spot as a general situation of Razz, and of course with the dead cards we can maybe get it a little bit tighter in the future. My opponent here is a high stakes player, but more of a big bet player, so that will come into play on 6th Street in this hand, but I felt that he might be a little bit inexperienced in some Razz situations, and that did lead into my thinking on 6th Street. But let's start it with this on 3rd. I could have gone for a 3-bet, but in this situation, can't really exactly remember my thought process, but I decided to just call. And on 4th, I caught a king, he caught a 9, and of course I was pretty happy that I didn't re-raise on 3rd, as now I've fallen decently behind, but certainly need to continue in this 2-bet pot. And on 5th Street, he caught a king and I caught open 2. So my board is 2 king 2, his board is showing 6-9 king, and I'm giving him credit for, some sort of reasonable 4-card 9. The first question here is obviously, can we continue on 5th Street? And in my experience playing Razz, I think this is a pretty no-brainer yes. We're getting approximately 4.5 to 1 once you count the antes and the bring-in, along with all the bets on the previous streets. So I need something like 18% hot and cold equity. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that because obviously I'm going to have some reverse implied odds in certain situations. But I think the way these boards are developing, it's actually a pretty good situation for me to continue because it's going to be much easier for me to play the hand than it is for him. For example, if I were to catch a 3 or a 6 on my board and he doesn't catch anything strong, I may be able to successfully bluff him in the hand, as obviously I can have all reasonable low cards here that would continue, and I think it will be a lot easier for me to read his hand than it will be for him to read mine. So the first question here is on 5th Street is we should just verify that we're getting at least, that we have at least 18%, maybe 20% equity, but I'm confident it's going to be more than that. I'm thinking it's going to be something around 25. And as we go ahead and run this one here in ProPokerTools, we can see that I have a little bit more than that, even with no dead card information. We have almost 29% equity with this hand here. So this would be a pretty substantial mistake, I think, to fold on 5th Street. But the key part of the hand occurred on 6th Street. I caught a 5 for a very premium low draw with the 2, 2, 3, 5, 6, and my opponent caught a jack. So it's a pretty straightforward situation. His board is 6-9 Jack King. He has a made Jack with a 9 draw. I have a 6 draw. It reminded me of that hand that we talked about previously, where I underrated my equity and didn't jam a pot in a cash game situation. This time, I did not make that mistake. I thought my opponent would make the mistake of thinking a little bit too in terms of showdown value about his hand in Razz. So the fact that basically he could see that I can't have a made hand would lead him to overrate his equity in the situation. And I felt that my 6 draw was definitely going to be the favorite against the made Jack with a 9 draw. So not only did I raise his bet on 6th Street here, but when he 3-bet, I decided to 4-bet. And at that point, he looked very perplexed and confused and called with some frustration. Really maybe not being sure what his equity was. Of course, I wasn't sure either, but I was confident that I was the favorite. Let's go ahead and click the magic button here in ProPokerTools Odds Oracle to see if I was indeed the favorite, and by how much. And it turns out that I was a little bit less of a favorite than I was expecting. 53% here, again, with no dead cards. I'm thinking in-game that I had some dead card information, and we can tinker with this a little bit. For example, if you know, for example, that, I don't know, a 3 and a 5 are already dead, and of course, like the bring-in probably was a high card, so maybe we can put a couple high dead cards here too. I believe this is going to benefit me. So I might have been thinking in game that the dead cards were particularly good for me to jam, and we can go ahead and look at how our equity will shift with these dead cards being very much in my favor. We'll go from 53% to 58.5. So this is a big deal when you're in these draw versus made hand situations, because now, you know, several of the cards that would be the worst case scenario for me on the river are out of play, and all the cards that I need to improve are in play. I'm actually shocked that just killing a 3 of 5, a king, queen, and a jack gave me 5.5% additional equity here. So I'm actually quite happy to see this, because I'm thinking in game, having written down notes on this hand from months ago, that I must have felt more confident with the dead card information, and we can see how big of a favorite I can be in the situation. So a good example and a good reminder of how important dead cards can be in certain stud game situations. After him finally slowing down on 6th Street and him being very frustrated, he checked me in the dark on the river, which is certainly a good play, as obviously I am drawing, and I was fortunate enough to, in this case, get rewarded for my bravery. I caught an ace, I was able to bet, and of course he called out of frustration and was very upset, that I had gotten there, but, we can see that my play looks pretty good. And then I guess the only other thing to note strategically about this hand would be, theoretically, I'm supposed to find some bluff combos on the river, right? But I will say, from a human psychology point of view, when you spew with a big draw in these sort of situations, your opponent is probably not going to be in a folding mood on the river for one more bet. So I would be a little bit cautious about trying to play GTO on the river and find those bluffs when you make that paired threes on the river, for example. Just a little bit of food for thought going forward, but this was certainly a fun and memorable Razz hand early on in the 50K PPC. Plenty of big hands to go, but always nice to get off to a good start and win a big pot, and find out also that I played the hand well. So let me know what questions that raises for you. Let me know what you think. Happy to see that I got this one right after jamming aggressively in a very spewy looking spot. And yeah, stay tuned for plenty more PPC hands to come, including some from much later in the tournament. We're going to go through it day by day. We're going to look at a number of hands that I have written down. We're going to even hopefully be able to find some of the footage from me at the stream table later on in the tournament. And yeah, plenty to report from the 50K PPC going forward on the channel. See you guys soon.